to set themselves up long-term while the Americans are doing all this short-term stuff, all this electoral cycle stuff. That's the worry. If the Americans, the biggest danger to the United States, not China, it's America. It's America getting in its own way and not investing in having the best products, the most competitiveness, the most attractive place to study, the most attractive place to live, the most attractive place to work.
That line sounds like a provocation, but in this conversation, it becomes a framework. The argument is not that geopolitical rivals disappear or that technology is harmless. It's that the deeper story is institutional weakness. What happens when global leadership fragments? When political systems fail to distribute the gains of innovation? And when societies lose the ability to adapt before pressure turns into backlash? The conversation moves from the breakdown of world order to the pressure inside the United States, to the way AI could sharpen both inequality and unrest. This is Synthesize, where we turn long podcast conversations into their most important ideas. Before the conversation turns to America's internal weaknesses or the social shock of AI, it establishes a larger geopolitical condition. The old assumption was that even rival powers still operated inside some shared system of rules. But if the country that underwrote that system pulls back and no successor can replace it, the problem is not a new order. It is the absence of one. This chapter matters because it gives the rest of the film its backdrop. Instability is no longer an exception inside the system. It is becoming the system.
Don't know, is it going to come from the left or the right? But we know that that level of uncertainty is growing. And it's not just growing in the United States, it's growing in the global order. Because if the Americans are no longer willing to act as the global leader, but no one else is capable of filling those shoes, you don't have a G7 or a G20 where governments come together and agree on the rules of the road. You have a G0, an absence of global leadership where people, the powerful, make the rules that are useful to them.
The phrase G0 compresses a sprawling geopolitical diagnosis into one clean idea. The danger is not simply conflict between strong blocs. It is fragmentation without coordination. That distinction matters because a leaderless world makes regional wars harder to contain, trade more vulnerable to disruption, and crisis management more improvised than planned. A leaderless world does not mean every crisis ends in catastrophe, but it does mean the best available outcomes are often ugly, partial, and transactional. In the middle of the conversation, that logic is applied to a regional conflict, not as a morality play, but as a forecast. The important shift here is tonal. Stability, if it comes, may not look like resolution. It may look like a compromise that leaves deeper tensions alive, while buying time and preserving leverage.
Crystal ball, no one does. But where I think this could be going on the basis of that, the most likely outcome is that the ceasefire is eventually extended, that we have those talks that were 21 hours that were substantive. There'll be more talks, maybe not with the vice president, but there'll be more talks. They'll become more substantive. And that eventually I expect that the Iranians are more likely to give on the nuclear issue and on enrichment if they're able to maintain a privileged position on transit through the strait, because that will help provide them with money and with security. They get a level of deterrence if everybody knows these guys could shut down the strait in the future. That helps them.
This is not optimism. It is strategic realism. The point is that in a fractured international environment, negotiated outcomes are likely to be based on leverage, choke points, and tolerable concessions rather than trust. Calling it the less bad ending preserves the interview's emphasis on how low the bar for stability has become. That external disorder sets up the documentary's most important reversal. The conversation does not deny foreign competition, it demotes it. The argument is that a country can survive rivals more easily than it can survive decay in its own political and institutional capacity. When a society stops investing in competitiveness, education, talent, and basic attractiveness. Decline stops being something imposed from outside. It becomes self-authored. This is the hinge of the film because it reframes geopolitics as a test of domestic seriousness.
To set themselves up long term while the Americans are doing all this short term stuff, all this electoral cycle stuff. That's the worry. If the Americans, the biggest danger to the United States, not China, it's America. It's America getting in its own way and not investing in having the best products, the most competitiveness, the most attractive place to study, the most attractive place to live, the most attractive place to work.
The power of this quote is that it relocates the source of vulnerability. It argues that external threats become truly dangerous when they meet internal paralysis. That frame also prepares the move into AI. Technological change is not just about innovation speed, but about whether a society can organize itself to absorb disruption without breaking politically. Once the conversation reaches AI, it avoids abstractions and lands on a scene. Not a theory of automation, but a worker's body. Cameras on heads, hands being watched, labor converted into training data. The force of the moment is that it makes technological displacement feel intimate and humiliating, not just efficient. This is the midpoint shift into vulnerability. What had sounded like a competitiveness problem now becomes a question of dignity, power, and who bears the cost of adaptation.
Yes, kind of. What's happening is a company has paid these Indian workers to wear cameras on their heads, to watch their hands, to train the AI so that the AI can do that job in the future.
To remove the workers from those jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like sitting on the branch of a tree and you yourself cutting there's this meme I'll throw up on the screen. It's of a guy sat on the branch of a tree and he's cutting the branch himself. And what you're seeing here is because the AI companies and the robotics companies need real world data of these jobs being done, they're now asking the workers in the factories to record themselves doing it so that they can replace them.
This clip works because it collapses the distance between innovation and dispossession. It makes clear that the labor problem is not only unemployment statistics. It is the experience of being instrumentalized in your own replacement. That emotional truth is what later makes political backlash feel not speculative, but almost inevitable. The conversation's next move is crucial. Job disruption is not treated as a contained labor market issue. It is treated as the beginning of a new political coalition. The warning is that AI anxiety will not remain concentrated among workers, already written into the populist story. It will spread upward into credentialed, suburban, professionally secure groups who assumed they were buffered from this kind of threat. Once that happens, the politics of AI change entirely. What looked technical becomes electoral, cultural, and volatile.
But you're not taking care of me and my family, so why am I letting that happen? You see this in Europe too. This is the Nigel Farage movement, like lots of stuff, right? They voted Trump in, not once, but twice. Despite everything he is, everything he stands for, they voted for him. We haven't seen women with advanced degrees, urban and suburban, worried about their jobs and worried about their kids. And that wave of populism is coming absolutely in 2028. And that is, AI is a very big piece of that. AI, data centers, and the rest. So in that regard, I agree that there's going to be a real political wave here. And I don't yet know.
The importance of this moment is the expansion of who feels threatened. When insecurity reaches groups with higher education, social influence, and electoral weight, technological disruption stops being politically containable. The film preserves that escalation by showing that backlash is not just about lost wages. It is about shaken expectations among people who thought they were safe. At this point, the conversation could slide into familiar AI fatalism. Instead, it does something more demanding. It shifts responsibility back onto institutions. The claim is not that technology lacks danger. It is that tools become catastrophic through the systems that deploy them, the incentives that govern them, and the politics that decide who benefits and who gets discarded. That is the moral pivot of the film. Fear of the machine is easier than accountability for the people designing the rules around it.
Up, it's not going to be because of technology. If we blow ourselves up, it's going to be because of people and politics.
What do you mean by that?
That the system is deploying these technologies in inhumane ways. It's allowing the benefits of the opportunities to be captured by a small number of individuals, a small number of companies that write their own rules and don't care about people that are getting angry. So when you ask, violence is the wrong thing. But if you're seeing that people are getting so angry that they're starting to do things that they see the only way that they think that they can respond is outside of the legal framework. It's not by voting for somebody.
This line rescues the documentary from simplistic techno-pessimism. It clarifies that the decisive variable is governance, concentration of gains, legitimacy of institutions, fairness of transition, and political capacity to respond before social anger hardens. The clip does not minimize risk. It assigns it more precisely. Once responsibility is placed where it belongs, the obvious question is whether any practical response exists between denial and panic. The conversation offers one. Not a grand utopian fix, but a transition design. Keep people employed, reduce the work week in vulnerable sectors, and use the recovered time for paid AI training. The significance is not only policy detail, it is the principle underneath it. If productivity rises, adaptation should not be borne entirely by workers, while institutions and firms capture the upside.
I don't think that happens. But I could easily see pilot programs that say, instead of a 5-day work week in the following areas that we think are going to be disrupted, it's going to be a 4-day work week or a 3-day work week. And we're going to pay you the same amount of money. But that additional day every week is going to be on AI training that will allow you to have a job, either be more effective in your existing job, because only the people that know how to deploy these tools are going to have a job in another 3 or 5 years, or will allow you to transition. But you've got to start spending the money on that now. And
what this preserves is a concrete alternative to passive displacement. The proposal treats retraining as part of employment, rather than a burden pushed onto the already disrupted. It also reinforces the film's larger argument. The future is not determined only by technical capacity, but by whether political systems can design fair bridges into it. After so much focus on fragility, the conversation allows itself a measured optimism. Not because the problems are small, but because despair can distort reality too. Over the long run, human societies have generated extraordinary gains in health, education, longevity, and poverty reduction. That matters here because the film is not arguing that collapse is inevitable. It is arguing that progress is real, but not self-sustaining. Optimism, in this frame, is not comfort. It is a reminder that capable societies can still choose well.
A version of the future, which is utopia.
I don't see how there isn't. I mean, I don't see how you allow human beings to create the kind of tools that we have and not have the ability to use them for good. The big stories of the world over the past 50 years, my lifetime, those big stories have been about growth. Those big stories have been about how human beings are living for longer with better education and better healthcare and more wealth and less starvation and less poverty. Those have been the big stories of the last 50 years. Now,
this chapter performs an important editorial function. It widens the time horizon. Without it, the documentary risks sounding like a theory of inevitable decline. With it, the viewer can hold both truths at once. Modern systems have delivered enormous gains, and those gains can still be squandered by bad politics and weak institutions. The conversation ends by bringing systemic analysis back to individual duty. In an information environment shaped by algorithms, incentives, and institutional pressure, independence is not just a personal asset, it is a civic obligation for anyone who still has room to speak freely. That closing move matters because it refuses the comfort of abstraction. If politics determines whether technology is used well or badly, then responsibility does not belong only to governments or companies. It also belongs to people who can still resist the pressure to conform.
Of their own story. The one thing I would tweak of what you just said, you said because you're independent, you have the opportunity, right, to do what you want and to say what you want, to interview whoever you want, handle you. I think you have the obligation.
Yeah.
In this environment, independence is a responsibility because there are so many people that are not in your position or my position that aren't independent, that can be fired, and they do not have the same opportunity. And instead, we can't be angry at those people. We have to recognize that, no, we are fortunate enough to be independent. And if you can't be fired, we have an obligation to be out there and above the 50% of people that are going to hate you for whatever reason.
This ending reframes freedom as something owed, not merely enjoyed. It is a fitting conclusion because the documentary has argued all along that systems are fragile when people inside them stop exercising agency. Independence becomes part of the public infrastructure of truth, especially when so many others are structurally constrained. The conversation's geopolitical core is that the world is drifting toward a vacuum of leadership, where instability comes less from a new order than from the absence of one. Its national argument is that America's greatest danger is self-inflicted. Domestic dysfunction, underinvestment, and political paralysis make every external threat harder to manage. Its technological argument is that AI will be decided less by the tools themselves than by politics. Who benefits, who is displaced, and whether institutions can build a fair transition before backlash hardens. If the most dangerous systems are ultimately shaped by human choices, what responsibilities fall on institutions, leaders, and ordinary citizens before instability becomes the default? If this kind of breakdown helps you think differently, you'll probably enjoy the next video too.